The Great Hall of Nexus Prime stretched out like a metal cathedral. Hundreds of alien beings sat in their designated sections, their forms as different as the worlds they came from. Some looked like walking trees with glowing leaves. Others were covered in scales that changed color with their moods. A few floated in containers filled with strange gases. At the center of it all sat Ambassador Sarah Chen. She was small compared to most of the aliens around her. Her dark hair was pulled back neatly, and she wore a simple blue suit that looked plain next to the elaborate robes and armor of the other delegates. She had been Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council for only 6 months, but she already understood how things worked here. The other species saw humans as children, cute perhaps, but not important. Humanity had only been traveling between stars for 97 years. Most of the civilizations in this room had been doing it for thousands. To them, humans were like babies taking their first steps. Sarah didn't mind. She had a job to do. "The matter before us today," announced Speaker Zalthoth, a being that looked like a giant purple jellyfish, "concerns territorial disputes in the Kepler sector. The Terran Federation claims mining rights to 17 uninhabited systems." A low rumble came from the HFY section. Sarah looked over at them and tried not to show her discomfort. The HFY were warriors, plain and simple. They stood nearly 8 feet tall with thick gray skin and forearms ending in clawed hands. Their faces looked like someone had mixed a lion with a crocodile. They wore dark armor covered in spikes, and their eyes glowed red in the dim light. Supreme Warcast Vexthor stood up slowly. He was their leader, and even among the HFY he was huge. Scars covered his face and arms like a map of old battles. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "The HFY Dominion objects," he said. "These systems lie within our expansion zone. The humans have no right to claim them." Sarah stood up calmly. She had expected this. "With respect, Supreme Warcast, the systems in question are more than 50 light-years from the nearest HFY world. According to Article 12 of the Galactic Settlement Accords, any species may claim uninhabited systems if they can reach them and establish mining operations within 10 standard years. Article 12 was written by weak species who fear true strength." Vexthor growled. "The strong take what they need. The weak make excuses." Several other delegates shifted uncomfortably. The HFY were known for their aggression, but they usually followed the basic rules of the Council. Vexthor seemed angrier than usual today. Sarah kept her voice steady. "The law exists to prevent conflicts. If every species simply took what they wanted by force, there would be no peace in the galaxy." "Peace," Vexthor spat. "A concept for those too cowardly to fight for what they deserve." "The Terran Federation is not cowardly," Sarah replied firmly. "We simply believe that civilization means following agreed-upon rules." The hall went quiet. Many of the aliens had never heard a human speak so directly to a HFY warrior. Vexthor's red eyes narrowed as he stared down at Sarah. "You dare lecture me, little mammal? Your species crawled out of caves while mine conquered stars. You are insects compared to the HFY." Sarah felt her heart speed up, but she didn't back down. "Age doesn't give anyone the right to break the law. The Galactic Settlement Accords apply to all member species equally." "Laws," Vexthor laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Laws are for the weak. The strong make their own laws." He began walking down toward the center of the hall where Sarah stood. His heavy boots rang against the metal floor. Other delegates started to murmur nervously. "Supreme Warcast," Speaker Zalthoth said, "please return to your section. We will resolve this matter through proper channels." But Vexthor kept walking. As he got closer, Sarah could see the weapons built into his armor. Energy blades, plasma rifles, and things she couldn't identify. The HFY came to diplomatic meetings armed for war. "You want to talk about laws?" Vexthor stopped just a few feet from Sarah. "Here is HFY law. The strong rule. The weak serve or die." Before anyone could react, Vexthor's hand moved to his belt. A bright blue blade of pure energy sprang to life. The plasma blade hummed with deadly power. "Vexthor, stop!" Speaker Zalthoth commanded. "You are in violation of Council protocols." But the HFY warrior wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were locked on Sarah, and she could see madness in them. Or maybe not madness, maybe just pure hatred for anything he saw as weak. "This is what happens to insects who forget their place," he snarled. Sarah had time for one last thought. She thought about her daughter back on Earth who had just started college. She thought about her husband who had told her to be careful among the aliens. She thought about humanity's dreams of finding friends among the stars. The plasma blade moved faster than thought. The hall erupted in chaos. Aliens screamed and shouted in dozens of languages. Some tried to rush forward, but Kethvar guards blocked their way with raised weapons. Others fled toward the exits. Sarah Chen lay on the metal floor, her life bleeding away. The last thing she saw was Vexthor standing over her, his blade still glowing. "Let this be a lesson," he announced to the hall. "This is what happens when inferior species forget their place. The Kethvar take what we want, when we want it. Anyone who stands in our way will share this fate." Speaker Zalthoth floated closer, his tentacles writhing with distress. "You have committed murder in the council chambers. This is an unthinkable violation of—" "I have executed a criminal," Vexthor interrupted. The human challenged Kethvar authority. "Under our laws, this was the proper response. Your laws do not apply here. Our laws apply wherever we choose to enforce them." Vexthor deactivated his blade and walked back toward his section. "I claim diplomatic immunity under the ancient protocols. This matter is closed." The ancient protocols were old laws that protected diplomatic representatives from prosecution in foreign territories. They had been written thousands of years ago to prevent wars between species. Now Vexthor was using them as a shield after committing murder. The other Kethvar delegates formed up around their leader and marched toward the exit. None of the other species tried to stop them. The Kethvar military was too strong, and everyone knew it. As they left, Vexthor called back over his shoulder. The systems in question now belong to the Kethvar Dominion. Anyone who objects is welcome to follow the humans' example. Then they were gone, leaving behind only Sarah Chen's body and a hall full of shocked aliens. Speaker Zalthoth spoke into the terrible silence. This session is adjourned. We will send formal condolences to the Terran Federation." But even as he said it, everyone in the hall knew that condolences would not be enough. The question now was what humanity would do in response. Most of the aliens expected angry words, maybe some trade sanctions. A few thought the humans might even try some kind of military response, though that would be suicide against the Kethvar war machine. None of them understood what was actually about to happen. The message went out across the galaxy within hours. Ambassador Sarah Chen, humanity's first representative to the stars, had been murdered in cold blood. Her killer walked free, protected by ancient laws and backed by military might. The galaxy waited to see how the young species would respond to this lesson in galactic politics. They would not have to wait long. News of Ambassador Chen's murder spread across human space like wildfire, on Earth in the colonies of Alpha Centauri, on the mining stations of Kepler 442, on the research outposts at the edge of human territory. Everyone heard what had happened within 6 hours. The galaxy's intelligence networks watched carefully for humanity's response. They expected riots, angry broadcasts, demands for justice. What they got instead was something much stranger. Silence. On Earth, people gathered in small groups to talk quietly. There were no mass demonstrations, no angry crowds in the streets. Children still went to school. Workers still went to their jobs. But something had changed in the way humans moved and spoke. There was a tension in the air, like the feeling before a thunderstorm. Captain Torres of the cargo ship Meridian was unloading supplies on Proxima Station when the news came through. His crew, 5 humans from different colonies, stopped what they were doing and listened to the report in complete silence. "Poor Sarah," whispered Engineer Kim. "She had a daughter, you know." "Just starting college, bastards," muttered Pilot Jackson, but he said it quietly, almost to himself. Captain Torres noticed that none of his crew seemed surprised. Angry, yes, sad certainly, but not surprised. It was as if they had all been waiting for something like this to happen. 2 days later, something odd happened. Torres received new orders from Earth Fleet Command. Not unusual in itself, cargo ships often got route changes. But these orders were different. He was to report to Luna Base immediately for equipment upgrades and mission reassignment. Torres had been hauling cargo for 12 years. He had never heard of equipment upgrades that required a trip to Luna Base. Similar orders went out across human space. Cargo ships, research vessels, even small family transports. All were quietly recalled to major human bases. The official reason was routine maintenance, but the crews knew better. Dr. Elizabeth Warren had been studying plasma physics on research station Kepler-7 for 3 years. Her work was purely theoretical, or so everyone thought. When she got orders to pack up her equipment and report to the research complex on Titan, she wasn't surprised. She had been expecting the call. Warren and her team loaded their equipment onto the next transport without questions. They knew their plasma research wasn't really about clean energy or space propulsion. It was about weapons. They had always known, deep down, that someday they might need to turn their knowledge toward darker purposes. The transport to Titan was crowded with other research teams. Physicists, engineers, computer specialists, biotechnology experts. No one talked much during the trip, but Warren could see the same expression on every face. They all knew why they were being gathered together. On the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, factory manager Robert Hayes watched as his production lines began retooling themselves. The official work orders said they were switching from consumer electronics to specialized components for deep space exploration. Hayes looked at the new blueprints and laughed grimly. He had served in the Colonial Defense Force 20 years ago. He knew what these specialized components really were. Guidance systems for missiles, power cores for energy weapons, armor plating for warships. His workers didn't ask questions. They just started building what they were told to build. The pattern repeated across human space. Research stations that had been working on separate projects suddenly began coordinating their efforts. Industrial complexes quietly shifted their production. Military bases that had been conducting training exercises began what looked suspiciously like war preparations. But it was all done quietly, calmly, efficiently. There were no dramatic speeches, no calls for vengeance, just millions of humans quietly going about their work. The Galactic Council tried to make contact with Earth's government. Speaker Zalthoth himself sent a formal message expressing the Council's regrets about the incident. He offered to establish a special committee to review the ancient protocols that had protected Vexthor from prosecution. The response from Earth came 12 hours later. It was brief and polite. The Terran Federation acknowledges the Council's message regarding the murder of Ambassador Sarah Chen. We appreciate your expressions of sympathy. We are currently reviewing our options and will respond through appropriate channels. No further communication is necessary at this time, that was it. No demands for justice, no threats, no emotional appeals. Just a simple acknowledgement and a polite request to be left alone. The Kethvar found this amusing. Vexthor himself issued a statement through their diplomatic channels. The humans show wisdom in accepting their place. Perhaps they can be taught to be useful servants after all. Other species weren't so sure. The Altarian Trade Consortium had been dealing with humans for 50 years. They knew humans better than most, and they were puzzled by the response. This is not normal human behavior, Consortium leader Veltar told his advisors. Humans are emotional creatures. They should be angry, demanding action. This calm acceptance, it doesn't fit their psychology. Perhaps they are simply being realistic, suggested Trade Representative Kolmar. They know they cannot challenge the Kethvar militarily. They are accepting the situation. But Veltar wasn't convinced. He had seen humans react to much smaller insults with fierce anger. The murder of their first ambassador should have triggered massive outrage. Instead, there was this strange, unsettling quiet. The quiet bothered other species too. The crystalline beings of Sigma Draconis had sensitive equipment that could detect emotional emanations across interstellar space. They reported that human space was humming with suppressed energy, like a power core about to overload. 3 weeks after the murder, something else strange happened. Human ships began disappearing from regular trade routes. Not dramatically, they just failed to show up for scheduled deliveries or meetings. When other species tried to contact human vessels, they got polite responses that the ships were dealing with technical difficulties and would resume normal operations soon. A month after the incident, the Altarian Trade Consortium realized they hadn't seen a human ship in 2 weeks. Their trade routes, which had depended heavily on human cargo vessels, were starting to suffer. Veltar sent a message to Earth asking about the delays. The response was the same polite, distant tone. The Terran Federation is currently conducting fleet-wide maintenance operations. Normal trade operations will resume when these operations are complete. We apologize for any inconvenience. By now, even the Kethvar were starting to notice. Human space had gone completely dark. No ships, no communications, no trade. It was as if humanity had simply withdrawn from galactic civilization. Perhaps they are preparing to surrender formally, suggested one of Vexthor's advisors. They may be organizing a tribute delegation, but Vexthor wasn't so sure. He had been a warrior for 200 years and he knew the difference between submission and preparation. This felt like preparation. 2 months after Sarah Chen's murder, the galaxy's intelligence services were completely baffled. Human space remained sealed. No ships came out, no communications went in. It was like trying to see through a wall of black glass. The few automated monitoring stations near human territory reported strange energy readings. Ships moving in large formations but using some kind of stealth technology that made them nearly impossible to detect. Industrial activity on a massive scale. Energy signatures that didn't match any known human technology. But whenever the monitors tried to get closer, they were politely but firmly turned away by human patrol ships that appeared out of nowhere. "We are currently conducting routine exercises," the human commanders would say. "For safety reasons, we must ask you to maintain a safe distance from our territory." The galaxy began to worry. Not about human aggression, that seemed impossible, but about what humans were doing in their self-imposed isolation. A species didn't cut itself off from galactic civilization without a good reason. And then, 3 months after Ambassador Sarah Chen died on the floor of the council chambers, the galaxy found out what that reason was. Human ships began appearing at the edges of Kethvar space. Not dozens of ships, as the intelligence reports had suggested, but thousands. Ships of designs no one had ever seen before, using technology that shouldn't have existed. The galaxy realized with growing horror that they had never really known humanity at all. Admiral Chen Yu stood on the bridge of the UES Remembrance, watching the tactical display with calm eyes. Around him, his officers worked quietly at their stations. No one spoke unless necessary. No one showed excitement or nervousness. They had trained for this moment for months, but the training had begun decades ago. "Admiral," reported Captain Martinez from the communications station, "all task forces are in position. The perimeter is complete," Chen Yu nodded. "Signal all ships. Operation Remembrance is now active." Across 47 star systems, the same order went out. Thousands of human warships moved into final positions around every Kethvar world, every space station, every mining outpost. The blockade was perfect and complete. On the Kethvar homeworld of Kethmara, Supreme Warcast Vexthor stood in his command center watching the displays with growing confusion. 3 months ago, humans had barely possessed 100 deep space vessels. Now his sensors showed thousands of ships surrounding his worlds. Where did they come from? He demanded of his intelligence chief. Warcast Thokvar, a scarred veteran with 3 cybernetic arms, studied the readouts nervously. "Unknown, Supreme Leader. Our intelligence indicated the humans possessed minimal military capability. These ships, they do not match any known human designs. The ships were beautiful in their own way, sleek hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No visible weapons, but energy readings that made the Kethvar military computers scream warnings. And they moved with a precision that suggested coordination on a level the Kethvar had never seen." "Are they preparing to attack?" Vexthor asked. "No, Supreme Leader. They are maintaining position at the edge of our sensor range. They appear to be waiting." On Nexus Prime, Speaker Zalthoth called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. The hall was packed with representatives from every major species. The news had spread quickly. Humanity had somehow produced a fleet larger than most galactic navies, and was surrounding Kethvar space. "We demand an explanation for this unprovoked aggression," announced Kethvar Warcast Morden, Vexthor's representative to the council. "The humans are threatening peaceful Kethvar worlds with military force." The human representative, a middle-aged woman named Ambassador Park, stood up calmly. She had replaced Sarah Chen only 2 weeks ago, but she spoke with quiet authority. "There is no aggression," she said simply. "Human forces are positioned in international space outside Kethvar territory. We are violating no laws." "Then what is the purpose of this fleet?" demanded Morden. Ambassador Park smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We are ensuring justice for Ambassador Sarah Chen." "Justice has already been served," Morden growled. "The human challenged Kethvar authority and paid the price. The matter is closed." "The matter will be closed," Park replied, "when Supreme Warcast Vexthor stands trial for murder." The hall erupted in startled voices. Several species began talking at once. The idea of putting a Kethvar Supreme Warcaste on trial was unthinkable. The Kethvar military had never allowed one of their leaders to be judged by outsiders. Impossible, Morden snarled. Vexthor is protected by diplomatic immunity. The ancient protocols, Park interrupted, protect diplomats who act in good faith. They do not protect murderers. The Kethvar do not recognize your authority to make such judgments. Ambassador Park's expression didn't change. Then I'm afraid the current situation will continue until you do. On board the Remembrance, Admiral Chen Yu received reports from his task force commanders. The blockade was holding perfectly. Not a single ship had entered or left Kethvar space in 6 hours. The technology that made it possible was something the galaxy had never seen. Humans called it phase lock interdiction. Every human ship was equipped with generators that could create stable tiers in space-time. By linking these generators across multiple ships, they could create barriers that prevented faster-than-light travel in targeted areas. It was technology that shouldn't have existed. According to every galactic physics textbook, such precise manipulation of space-time required computational power beyond what any known civilization possessed. The textbooks were wrong. Admiral, reported Commander Singh from the science station, we're detecting multiple attempts to break through the interdiction field. The Kethvar are trying everything. Subspace tunneling, dimensional shifting, even old-fashioned ramming attacks. Nothing's working, Chen Yu nodded. Expected? How are our supplies? All ships are operating within normal parameters. Automated supply drones are maintaining regular deliveries from the industrial stations. We can maintain this blockade indefinitely. That was another shock for the galaxy. Humans weren't just surrounding Kethvar space with a few ships. They had created a complete military infrastructure, with supply lines, repair facilities, and logistics networks that could support thousands of vessels for years if necessary. Dr. Warren, now serving as Chief Science Officer aboard the Remembrance, monitored the alien response to their technology. Every major species was sending science ships to observe the blockade from a safe distance. Their sensors were working overtime, trying to understand how human technology worked. They would be disappointed. Human ships were equipped with sophisticated jamming systems that made detailed scans impossible. The observers could see the effects, the interdiction fields, the energy barriers, the perfect coordination between ships, but they couldn't understand the principles behind them. The Altarians have sent their best science vessel, Warren reported to Admiral Chen Yu. They've been scanning us for 6 hours. I don't think they understand what they're seeing. Good, Chen Yu replied. Let them wonder. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for this moment since their first contact with galactic civilization 97 years ago. While other species saw humans as primitive newcomers, human leaders had been studying galactic politics and planning for the inevitable crisis. They had learned early that the galaxy respected only strength. Species that couldn't defend themselves were conquered, enslaved, or ignored. Humanity had decided to avoid that fate. So while human diplomats spoke of peace and cooperation, human scientists and engineers worked in secret. Research stations that appeared to study peaceful applications of technology were actually weapons laboratories. Industrial complexes that claimed to produce consumer goods were manufacturing military equipment. The entire human economy had been quietly restructured to support a war effort that most humans didn't even know existed. Until now. On Kethmara, panic was beginning to spread. The Kethvar were a warrior culture, but they had never faced anything like this. They were used to fighting enemies they could see, battles they could win through superior firepower or tactical skill. This was something else entirely. The human blockade was like being trapped in a cage made of pure energy. Kethvar ships that tried to leave their system simply stopped working when they hit the interdiction barriers. Their engines would shut down, their weapons would fail, their life support systems would begin malfunctioning. But the humans didn't attack. They just waited. What do they want? Demanded Vexthor. He had called together his war council, hoping to find a solution to this impossible situation. They want you, Supreme Leader, replied Thokvar quietly. They want to put you on trial for killing their ambassador. Never, Vexthor roared. I am Kethvar. I bow to no inferior species. But even as he said it, he could see the doubt in his subordinate's eyes. The humans had appeared out of nowhere with technology that made the Kethvar military look like children playing with toys. They had surrounded 47 star systems in a matter of hours. They had cut off the Kethvar Dominion from the rest of the galaxy with casual efficiency. Maybe the humans weren't as inferior as everyone had thought. The blockade held for 3 days without a single shot being fired. The galaxy watched in amazement as humanity demonstrated a kind of power no one had imagined possible. Not the power to destroy, though that was clearly present, but the power to simply say no to an entire interstellar civilization and make it stick. On the 4th day, the Kethvar tried to break out in force. 200 of their best warships, led by Warcast Thokvar himself, charged at the human blockade around their primary military base. The human response was swift and precise. The attacking ships found themselves caught in gravity wells that held them motionless in space. Their weapons were disabled by targeted electromagnetic pulses. Their crews were rendered unconscious by sonic fields that penetrated their armor. Within 30 minutes, the entire Kethvar attack force was floating helplessly in space, completely intact but utterly powerless, and still, the humans didn't fire a shot. The message was clear. Humanity could have destroyed the attacking ships easily. Instead, they had chosen to demonstrate perfect, overwhelming control. The galaxy began to understand that something fundamental had changed. The young species that everyone had dismissed as primitive had just defeated one of the most powerful military forces in known space without killing anyone. But the most terrifying part wasn't the technology or the tactics, it was the patience. The Galactic Council chambers had never seen anything like it. Emergency session after emergency session, with representatives demanding answers, solutions, intervention. The human blockade of Kethvar space was now in its 4th month, and the implications were shaking galactic civilization to its core. Speaker Zalthoth floated at the center of the chaos, his tentacles writhing with stress. Order, we must have order. But there was no order. The consortium of free traders was demanding action. Their trade routes through Kethvar space were completely cut off. The Altarian Science Council wanted access to human technology. The Crystalline Collective was picking up distress harmonics from Kethvar worlds that were disrupting the psychic balance of local space. And through it all, Ambassador Park sat quietly in the human section, watching the proceedings with calm eyes. Ambassador Park, Speaker Zalthoth called out when the noise finally died down. Surely there must be some way to resolve this crisis through negotiation. Park stood up slowly. Of course, Speaker. The resolution is simple. Turn over Warcast Vexthor for trial. The blockade ends immediately. You cannot hold an entire civilization hostage for the actions of one individual, protested consortium leader Veltar. We're not holding anyone hostage, Park replied. Kethvar citizens are free to live their lives on their worlds. We're simply ensuring they cannot leave until justice is served. Justice? Roared Morden from the Kethvar section. You speak of justice while starving entire planets. Are Kethvar worlds starving? Park asked mildly. The question caught Morden off guard. The truth was that no Kethvar world was actually starving out yet. The Dominion had stockpiles and their agricultural worlds were still producing food. But everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Our civilization requires resources from across the galaxy, Mordun said. You cannot expect us to survive in isolation indefinitely. The Terran Federation survived in isolation for most of our history, Park replied. I'm sure the mighty Kethvar can manage it for a while. On Kethmara, the situation was indeed becoming desperate. Not because of immediate shortages, but because of what the isolation meant for Kethvar society. The Kethvar were conquerors. Their entire culture was built around expansion, domination, the constant acquisition of new territories and resources. Warrior castes gained status by leading successful raids on other species. The civilian population took pride in their military's victories across the galaxy. Now, for the first time in over 1,000 years, the Kethvar were trapped on their own worlds. Supreme Warcast Vexthor paced his command center like a caged animal. Reports streamed in from across the Dominion, and all of them told the same story. The human blockade was perfect. Not a single ship had managed to break through. Not one message had gotten past the interdiction fields. What about our colonies outside Dominion space? He asked Warcast Thokvar. All contact lost, Supreme Leader. As far as we can determine, the humans have identified every Kethvar settlement in the galaxy and cut them off as well. That was impossible, but it was happening anyway. The humans somehow knew the location of every secret Kethvar base, every hidden outpost, every covert military installation. Ships that tried to reach these facilities found themselves facing human interdiction fields. How? Vexthor demanded.
How do they know so much about our operations?
Thokvar looked uncomfortable. Our intelligence services are investigating. But Supreme Leader, we may have underestimated human capabilities in many areas. The understatement of the millennium, Vexthor thought bitterly. The humans had technology that the Kethvar didn't understand, coordination that seemed impossible, and resources that apparently came from nowhere. Where had they been hiding all of this? The answer would have terrified him if he had known it. Humanity hadn't been hiding anything. They had been building it quietly and patiently for nearly a century. Dr. Warren sat in her laboratory aboard the Remembrance, monitoring reports from across human space. The operation was proceeding exactly as planned. Every human world, every station, every ship was contributing to the effort. There had been no dissent, no protests, no calls to abandon the blockade. That unity was what truly frightened the other species. The Altarians had tried to negotiate with individual human colonies, hoping to find someone willing to break ranks. The Crystallines had attempted to contact human dissidents or peace movements. Even the Kethvar had tried to bribe human commanders directly. All had failed. Every human they contacted gave the same response. Justice for Sarah Chen. The blockade continues. It wasn't that humans couldn't disagree with each other. Warren knew perfectly well that human space was full of different opinions, political parties, competing interests. But when threatened from outside, all of those differences disappeared. Every human understood at a level deeper than thought that they were all in this together. That concept was alien to most galactic civilizations. The Altarians were traitors first, always looking for individual profit. The Crystallines thought in terms of collective harmony, but had no experience with coordinated action. Even the Kethvar, for all their military discipline, were ultimately motivated by personal honor and status. Humans were different. They could function as individuals, but when necessary, they could become something larger. A single organism with billions of parts all working toward the same goal. The Kethvar were learning this lesson the hard way. Month 5 of the blockade brought new problems to Kethvar worlds. Not hunger, they still had food, but something worse. Despair. Young Kethvar warriors had grown up expecting to earn glory in battles across the galaxy. Now they sat in barracks on their homeworld, unable to fight, unable to prove themselves, unable to understand how their mighty military had been so completely neutralized. Kethvar merchants who had built fortunes trading with conquered species found their businesses worthless overnight. Kethvar scientists working on projects that required rare materials from other worlds watched their research grind to a halt. And everywhere, the question that no one wanted to ask out loud: how had the humans done this? Perhaps, suggested one of Vexthor's advisors in a private meeting, we should consider their demands. The advisor was Warcast Mulkar, an old friend who had served with Vexthor for 50 years. If he was suggesting surrender, the situation was truly desperate. You want me to submit to trial by inferior beings? Vexthor snarled. I want our people to be free, Mulkar replied quietly. Supreme Leader, we have been trapped for 5 months. Our youngest warriors have never seen battle. Our merchants grow poorer each day. Our scientists cannot continue their work. How long can we endure this? As long as necessary. The Kethvar do not bow to threats. But even as he said it, Vexthor knew the truth. His people were warriors, not prisoners. They were conquerors, not captives. The blockade was slowly destroying everything that made them Kethvar. Meanwhile, the human blockade remained as perfect as the day it began. Ships rotated in and out on precise schedules. Supply lines functioned flawlessly. Equipment was maintained, crews were rested, and the interdiction fields never flickered. The galaxy was learning that humans possessed something most species had lost long ago: the ability to commit their entire civilization to a single purpose and maintain that commitment indefinitely. Other species fought wars, but they got tired. They made peace when the costs became too high, when their people demanded an end to the conflict, when the economic burden became unbearable. Humans were different. They seemed capable of maintaining this level of effort forever if necessary. Every human world was contributing resources. Every human citizen supported the blockade. Every human military officer followed orders without question or complaint, and they were patient in a way that chilled the galaxy's observers. They weren't angry or excited or desperate for results. They were simply waiting, as if they were prepared to maintain the blockade for years or decades or however long it took to achieve their goal. Month 6 brought the first formal attempt at intervention. A coalition of species led by the Altarians demanded that the Galactic Council take action to end the blockade. The humans are disrupting galactic commerce, Veltar announced. Trade routes are failing. Colonies are running short of supplies and several species are facing economic crisis. This cannot continue. Ambassador Park listened to 6 hours of speeches about the need for compromise, the importance of trade, the danger of allowing any single species to dictate terms to the rest of the galaxy. When it was her turn to speak, she stood up and said simply, "Vex Thor killed Ambassador Sarah Chen in cold blood, in front of witnesses and claimed immunity. Until he faces justice, the blockade continues." Next item of business. The coalition tried economic sanctions against human space. They discovered that humans had spent the last century building a largely self-sufficient economy. The sanctions hurt some human businesses, but they didn't affect the blockade. They tried diplomatic pressure. Every major species sent formal protests to Earth. The responses were polite but firm. Justice for Sarah Chen. The blockade continues. They even tried offering rewards. The consortium offered humanity exclusive trading rights, advanced technology, territorial concessions. The response never varied. Justice for Sarah Chen. The blockade continues. The message came on the first day of the 8th month. A simple transmission from Kethmara to the human flagship, broadcast on open channels so the entire galaxy could hear. "This is Supreme Warcast Vex Thor of the Kethvar Dominion. I request safe passage to Nexus Prime to face trial for my actions against the human ambassador." Admiral Chen Yu read the message twice before responding. Around him on the bridge of the Remembrance, his officers maintained their professional calm, but he could see the relief in their eyes. 8 months of perfect discipline, of unwavering commitment to their mission, was finally bearing fruit. "Signal all task forces," Chen Yu ordered. "Prepare to escort the Kethvar delegation to Nexus Prime. Maintain full security protocols until Vex Thor is in custody." The Kethvar delegation consisted of a single ship, Vex Thor's personal dreadnought, escorted by 24 human vessels. As the small convoy moved through space toward the council station, the galaxy watched with a mixture of amazement and fear. The mighty Kethvar Dominion, conquerors of 1,000 worlds, had surrendered, but surrender was not quite the right word. On Kethmara, Warcast Thokvar stood before the emergency council of remaining Kethvar leaders. The holographic displays around him showed the slow collapse of their civilization. 17 worlds are experiencing critical shortages, he reported. Our industrial base is failing without imported materials. 3 colonies have requested permission to negotiate separate treaties with local species, and our warrior castes. He paused, struggling with words. Our young warriors are beginning to question the value of military service. That last point was the most devastating. The Kethvar military was built on pride, honor, and the promise of glorious conquest. 8 months of helpless imprisonment had destroyed all 3. "How many of our people support Vex Thor's decision?" asked Warcast Zekmar. 78%, according to the latest surveys. The remainder demand that we fight to the last, but they have no plan for breaking the human blockade. Because there was no plan that could work. The Kethvar had tried everything: direct assault, stealth infiltration, technological countermeasures, even suicide attacks. The human response had been the same every time: perfect, overwhelming control without destruction. The humans could have wiped out the Kethvar fleet months ago. Instead, they had chosen to demonstrate their power through restraint. It was a lesson in superiority that cut deeper than any military defeat. On Nexus Prime, the trial of Vex Thor began 3 days later. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from every species in the galaxy. Security was provided by human marines, a sight that would have been unthinkable 8 months earlier. Vex Thor stood in the defendant's cage, still massive and intimidating, but somehow diminished. The proud warrior who had murdered Sarah Chen had become a symbol of his species' helplessness. The prosecution was led by Ambassador Park herself. She presented her case with the same calm efficiency that had characterized the entire human response. "The facts are simple," she told the assembled representatives. "Vexthor murdered Ambassador Chen in cold blood, in front of witnesses during a diplomatic proceeding. He then claimed immunity under the ancient protocols and refused to submit to justice. The defense, led by a Kethvar legal advocate, argued that Vexthor had acted according to Kethvar law and custom. My client was enforcing the natural order," the advocate claimed. "The strong rule, the weak serve. This is the way of the universe." Park's response was devastating in its simplicity. Ambassador Chen was not weak. She was protected by law, by treaty, and by the principles that make galactic civilization possible. When those protections failed, the Terran Federation was forced to provide its own. The evidence was overwhelming. Video recordings of the murder, witness testimony, forensic data, all presented with methodical precision. But the real trial was not happening in the courtroom. It was happening in the minds of every species representative, as they watched humanity exercise power on a scale they had never imagined possible. The verdict was delivered after 3 days of proceedings. Guilty of murder, guilty of diplomatic assault, guilty of violations against galactic law. Vexthor was sentenced to life imprisonment on a neutral world. His assets forfeited to pay reparations to the Chen family. But the sentence was almost irrelevant compared to what happened next. Ambassador Park stood to address the assembled council, and the hall fell silent. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of humanity's demonstrated power. "The Terran Federation takes no joy in these proceedings," she began. Ambassador Sarah Chen believed in peace, in cooperation between species, in the rule of law. She died defending those principles. Park's voice grew harder. "For 8 months we have demonstrated what happens when those principles are violated. We have shown that the Terran Federation can project power across the galaxy when necessary. We hope never to do so again." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But make no mistake. We remember everything. Every slight, every threat, every violation of civilized conduct. And we protect our own." The silence in the hall was deafening. Representatives who had spent months trying to find ways around human power suddenly understood the futility of their efforts. Humanity was not just another species joining galactic civilization. They were potentially its most dangerous member. "The blockade ends today," Park continued. "The Kethvar people are free to rejoin galactic society. But the Kethvar Dominion as a political entity is dissolved. Their former territories will be administered by the Galactic Council until permanent arrangements can be made." Even Vexthor, standing in his cage, looked stunned. His entire civilization had been casually dismantled by a species he had considered inferior. The aftermath was swift and far-reaching. Within weeks, every major species had opened new diplomatic channels with Earth. Trade agreements that had been stalled for years were suddenly approved. Territorial disputes involving human colonies were resolved in humanity's favor without argument. The Altarians were the first to request formal alliance talks. "We have always recognized human potential," Veltar said in his official statement. Though everyone knew he was lying, the Crystalline Collective, which communicated through harmonic resonance, began studying human psychology in earnest. They wanted to understand how a species could achieve such perfect coordination without losing individual identity. Even species that had never interacted with humans before sent diplomatic missions to Earth. Everyone wanted to know how humanity had hidden such capabilities for so long. The answer was simple and terrifying. They hadn't hidden anything. They had built it patiently and systematically while pretending to be weak. Dr. Warren found herself transferred to a new position, Director of Galactic Relations Research. Her job was to study other species and identify potential threats to human interests. It was a job that hadn't existed before the blockade, but everyone understood its importance now. "We need to understand how they think," explained Secretary of Defense Rodriguez during Warren's briefing. "The Kethvar made the mistake of underestimating us. We can't make the same mistake about them." The research revealed disturbing patterns. The Kethvar were not unique in their contempt for inferior species. Many galactic civilizations operated on hierarchical principles, with stronger species dominating weaker ones. The only thing that had protected humanity was the mistaken belief that humans were weak. That belief was gone now. Every species in the galaxy knew that humans possessed technology and coordination capabilities that could challenge any civilization. The question was what humanity would do with that knowledge. The answer came in a speech by President Zhang to the United Earth Congress, broadcast across human space and transmitted to every galactic capital. "We are not conquerors," she said. "We are not interested in dominating other species or building an empire. But we will never again allow our people to be threatened or harmed by those who mistake restraint for weakness." She outlined humanity's new galactic policy: peaceful coexistence with all species that respected human rights, but swift and overwhelming response to any threats. Trade and cooperation with civilized societies. Isolation and sanctions for those that refused to follow civilized norms. It was a policy backed by the demonstrated ability to make it stick. Admiral Chen Yu remained in command of the Galactic Defense Fleet, a new branch of the human military dedicated to projecting power beyond human space. His ships patrolled the trade routes, protected human colonies, and served as a visible reminder of human capabilities. But perhaps the most significant change was in how other species treated their own diplomats. The murder of an ambassador was now understood to be not just a crime but a potential act of civilizational suicide. No species wanted to find themselves on the receiving end of human justice. 5 years later, Ambassador Park stood in the same council hall where Sarah Chen had died. She was delivering her final report before rotating back to Earth. "The Terran Federation remains committed to peaceful cooperation with all species," she told the assembly. "We believe that diversity makes us stronger, that trade benefits everyone, and that the rule of law must apply equally to all."